Hello, and welcome to the Earthly Roots podcast,
where we chat all things gardening, homesteading, and connecting to nature.
We're your hosts, Diane and Robyn.
The Earthly Roots podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.
Hello, welcome back to the Earthly Roots podcast.
Hello, thank you for joining in on another episode.
Yes, I don't know what number episode this is by now, but I'm feeling like we are almost pros. We're getting really comfortable, having some really good chats, and I think this one's going to be an extra useful one.
Yeah.
And an extra fun one.
Definitely. Yeah, we're going to be talking all about rain. It's currently raining.
And it's going to be raining for a long time.
Yep. We are hiding from the rain. We really wanted to get outside and do some gardening, but alas, that is not happening. So we're just going to chat about the rain and what's happening. And I mean, we are in a La Nina situation here in Australia at the moment. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be useful to talk about what it means for gardening, what it means for homesteading, raising animals, what plants grow well in it, just all the things about how to manage rain events, because it's quite relevant at the moment for us in particular.
That's right. It's going to be around for a while. If you were in Australia on the south coast, especially during last summer and springtime, then you would know just how brutal the rains can get, and they're relentless. They don't go away anytime soon. And if we're expecting to have another year like that this year, rain is wonderful, especially when you're used to droughts. But when you have rain and rain and rain and rain and it doesn't stop, there's a lot of other things that you can do to manage it and kind of prepare your homesteads and gardens to make sure you're taking advantage of it as opposed to just being flooded out.
Yeah.
But I mean, of course, I say that lightly because of where we are, but there are places where it is to the point of floods and they're devastating. And so this advice really will kind of go to those in similar positions to us.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of...
we recognise all of the floods that's happened in Australia, and it has been absolutely devastating, and just I can't imagine how hard it would be for farmers and people whose livelihoods depend on the land to be able to manage it all, because it's just heartbreaking.
It's devastating. It's so interesting how these big rain events always seem to come after years and years of drought. It's almost like the rain has finally had a taste of coming back to the land, and then it just can't help itself and it just keeps going. But because the land has been so deprived of water, if you've ever had a really dry spot in your garden and then tried to water it after not watering it for a long time, you might notice that the water kind of beads off or takes a really long time to go in. And a really good tip, if you are not watering something regularly, when you do go to water it the first time, you should add a little bit of water, add a little bit more, and then over time it'll be able to take it in.
Yeah, even in pots as well. It's a good tip, because I noticed some of the pots around have gotten really, really dry on the top, so they become kind of hydrophobic.
Yeah.
So then either submerging the pot in water so that it can take it up. Yeah, it's a lot better than applying water on the top, because it will just pool and just fall away.
It just doesn't work. Yeah, and then the plant doesn't get anything from it. Yeah. And that seems to happen most with terracotta pots, and I think it's the clay dries out very quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to being able to talk about, you know, what to do before a big rain event, what we can be doing to prepare our gardens, what we can do during, when it's happening and we're right in the midst of it, feeling quite overwhelmed and undermotivated. And then some of the things we can do after, which I know you've mentioned before in some of your YouTube videos. For those of our listeners that don't know, Robyn and I actually have our own YouTube channels.
Yes.
Focused all on nature, gardening, homesteading, and just our lives living this wholesome little lifestyle. So
we try.
Go and check it out if you've got some time. There's lots of value there. But before we get into any of our topics, I know you did a little bit of research about what El Nino really means. Because when I think of it, I think we're just going to have lots and lots of rain. for a year straight and I'll just be at home crying.
Well, yeah. So there's a difference between La Nina and El Nino.
Oh, oops.
So
I said it wrong,
it's okay.
didn't I?
It's okay.
That's why I need you to tell me.
We're all good here. But yeah, so there's a difference between La Nina and El Nino. So they're two wet and dry seasons, typically. So it's more so a scale rather than a definition of a wet and dry year.
Okay.
So you can have La Nina, which is more on the wet year, and El Nino, which is more on the dry.
Okay. And
it's all to do with the ENSO, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation Index, which is basically the temperatures of some of the oceans around.
Okay.
So when oceans warm up and cool down, different sides of the planet has warmer or cooler conditions, and warmer air always rises. And so that means that you have more condensation, more clouds, and more rain. So trying to put it into, I'm trying to also remember it on the graph that I've seen. But yeah, basically when one side of the oceans are cooler, there'll be trade winds, and they always go from, well, typically most of the time go from east to west. So you'll have cooler weather in the oceans on South America, which will come over, the trade winds coming over to Australia, which will cause warmer weather in oceans towards Australia.
Okay.
That'll cause then more condensation, more rain, more chance of cyclones and things like that.
Wow. So does that mean we're also in for a more humid kind of summer as well?
Yeah. So it's pretty humid at the moment, and winter has also been fairly humid, I've found here. But it's all on a scale kind of thing. So the Bureau of Meteorology will classify it more as a La Nina or more El Nino. And typically there's about 4 years difference between the scales. And
so we're only halfway through it? Is that what you're saying?
It can sit neutral as well. So it can sit in between them when it'll be more of a mild weather year. But yeah, we've definitely, like, I can remember periods when we've had the drought and the fires and things like that. That was more on the scale of El Nino.
Yeah.
I think hopefully I was saying El Nino, not El Nina, but
I think that was just me. I said the wrong term as soon as I started
waking
talking.
up this morning, but yeah.
Yeah, it is early. It's earlier than we normally record our podcasts, but we're into it.
Yeah. But it is interesting because you can use those weather predictions to kind of predict how the year is going to be in the garden, and then maybe what you might want to plant, or how any big projects that you might want to do, things like that. So unfortunately, I chose probably the worst time to start a flower farm.
Well, but you won't have to water your garden this year.
I haven't actually watered it at all.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
not even once.
Yeah.
Wow.
Since we moved in February, only just when I was sowing some seeds, maybe once or twice, I had the watering can out. But it has been crazy how much water has just been retained in the soil because we have very clay soil.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But in a way, that's kind of wonderful because it goes back to what we were saying just as we started, because the ground is being watered constantly. And sometimes the rain is pretty kind and it only comes in a little bit. We don't have those big flooding events as often, or we haven't yet. So the ground's being able to kind of keep up with it all. There'll be spots in the ground, in the garden, that become a little bit swampy and maybe can't handle it as well. But for the most part, like, not having to water your garden is a huge time saver. I know that that's the one thing that gardeners always complain that they don't have enough time for.
Yeah.
That's why irrigation is such a big thing, because you can set up a system that slowly waters the ground over time and then not have to worry about it or forget about it, and then that cause your plants to die or whatever else. So
yeah. Do you have any irrigation set up at your place?
No, I would really love to get some irrigation set up, especially around like our fruit orchards, or even on my flower gardens, because I don't tend to go over to them as much. But I personally really like the process of watering my gardens in the morning, like going out there and just seeing everything, exploring, seeing the bugs, the birds, and just taking the time to almost meditate while I water. Yeah. So I'm missing that a bit, not being able to water the garden.
Yeah. I don't have that same feeling.
No, it's a bit of a chore.
I can understand it, but yeah, I think just from where I've previously lived, it has been a chore to water the garden and make sure the plants are actually staying alive. But maybe down here I can change my attitude towards it.
Maybe. I mean, it's definitely not as harsh of a summer down here as it is up where you came, like from Queensland. So I think you will enjoy it a little bit more. But yeah, who knows?
And we both live I live very close to the coast, and you live relatively close as well, which will mean that we get a little bit more rain than some other areas, particularly around kind of the Bega Valley area.
Yeah. Well, our rain's been non-stop so far.
Yeah.
But along with rain comes wind. And I think as we start talking about what we can do before a big rain event and how we can start to prepare our gardens and homesteads for rain, we will also be keeping in mind that wind is a very strong factor that comes in with the rain, especially around the south coast. Our springtime is one of the windiest times of the year, and at my house we have a 360-degree porch around the house, and most of the furniture that we put on one end of the house ends up on the other end by the end of the season, and multiple times too. So we even have like sideways rain just hitting the window. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's not fun. Yeah, I've been also wondering about some of the trees around, because when the soil is so saturated and you have wind, it's a recipe for disaster with trees falling down. So I know there's been quite a few around us that have fallen down.
Yeah.
But yeah, the roots just in the ground just cannot hold on any longer.
We had a massive tree come down on our forest walk.
Yeah.
It hasn't come down fully. It's like leaning and seems like do not walk under there.
Yeah.
Avoid that area.
Dangerous.
Yeah, it can be. Widow makers is what they call them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So if you go under them, and that's the end of you.
Don't do
But
that.
anyways, let's turn this to a more positive note, and let's talk about what are we doing in our own gardens and on our homestead to prepare before the rains really hit, because we've had them quite a bit already, but more is to come. So right now is the time to be preparing. So what are some of the things that you started to do in your garden, or you have been doing, because there's been rain for a while, to prepare it for the moisture?
Going back a few months, I tried when we first moved here just to understand the land first. So that's a really big thing that I like to do, and is a permaculture principle as well, to observe the land, to really know where water goes. Granted, you can't understand where all of it's going to go, particularly with a rain event like this, because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the water table is so high now, but just knowing where the water pools in your land is probably the best place to start, because then you can focus on those problem areas.
Yeah. What would you do with those areas? The areas that become kind of swampy or overwhelmed with water, what would you suggest be the next step?
Probably just increasing aeration if it's a really bad problem. So I picked up a broadfork
that's
a
great.
few months ago. Yeah. Haven't been able to use it too much, but it has helped in some areas where it's basically like a really, really large fork that you put into the ground, and you fork the soil a little bit, not turning it or anything like that, just adding air pockets in.
Yeah.
And that will allow, over time, water to move through the landscape a little bit more.
Yeah, because that's the thing with rain events and a lot of water in one place for the soil, is that the water kind of condenses the soil so that all of those air pockets that would naturally be there caused by worms or roots or whatever else, all of that starts to go away, and then it becomes very compact. So being able to fork the ground and just get that air into it is
definitely
vital.
Yeah, and I mean, it also depends on the type of soil. So if you've got more sandy soil, that's probably good, because it will drain. When you've got clay soil, the particles of the soil are so small that it's basically just really compact when it gets wet. And you can even make pottery out of some of the areas in the garden. I've dug a hole and there's just 100% clay in it.
That's cool. I'd love to grab some from you.
Sure, take it.
Make some projects with it since we're stuck inside more often.
Yeah, it's crazy. But another big thing that you can do is adding organic matter into areas. So if you've got high clay or even sandy soils, organic matter is a really great addition. And this can be like in the form of, compost or on top amendments, but it can also be adding things like cover crops in or plants that typically really enjoy high water content that can have their roots into the ground.
Yeah.
And it'll be, a living organic matter for some of it, and then the roots will die and become dead organic matter and slowly break down. So I've experimented with cover crops in one area.
Yeah, I would love to find out more, because I think a fear that I have had, and I wonder if some of our listeners have had this fear as well, is if you plant lots of cover crops, because a lot of them are things like clover and things like that, which when you see growing in other parts of your garden, like they seem like a weed.
Yeah.
And my fear is if I plant that into my garden beds, how on earth am I going to get that out so that I can plant my next round of veggies?
Yeah. Well, I'm not planning on taking it out at all. I'm just planning on putting a black tarp over it. So it'll kill it, the sun will kill it, and it'll slowly be worked back into the soil with all of the worms. Mm-hmm. So it is like a little bit more of a lengthy process. It's not an overnight process, but some of these things in the cover crop mix, it's just a random mix of a lot of brassicas. Radishes are really great cover crops because they automatically will grow and put their roots into the soil and break it up. Yeah, so that's a great cover crop. There's buckwheat, any kind of rye or oats, anything that's really fast growing that you really don't have to baby is a good cover crop. And you can even just grab, like, if you've got really old seeds in your seed stash, I know you all do out there.
Oh yeah,
I know you all do. Like beans or legumes, you can use them as a cover crop. And typically I'll put a tarp over them before they start to set seed, just because then you'll have them forever in the area if you let all of the cover crop plants go to seed. Unless you want to grow beans or something like that, and then you can actually harvest them.
Yeah. So at what age would you harvest them? Like, how tall are they off the ground? Are they, because you said before seed, but I mean for some plants like brassicas, that can be almost a tree.
Yeah, well, it really depends on how long you want to keep it in the ground for. So it depends on the type of variety, and if there's any nitrogen properties of the cover crop too, you can wait for that to get developed and then work into the soil. But you can end cover crops in like 4 weeks or so. You don't have to keep it in there for a long time. It's just up to you.
So if you're worried about the roots really setting in and it being hard to get rid of in a way afterwards, like covering it up after 4 weeks while it's still young, about, 5-10 centimeters off the ground. Yeah, and that's plenty.
Fine. Yeah. I mean, I'll keep mine for a little bit longer, but I definitely won't have anything get too woody or too thick of a stem, just because then it's too hard for it to break down.
Oh, of course.
I want it nice and leafy, and because it's planted so thickly, they're not going to have that chance anyway. They'll not reach anywhere near maturity.
Yeah. And cover crops are a great thing. I think with rains, the number one way that you can prepare for it and get your garden started is to plant more things into the ground, because the more established your plants are, let's say like your perennials, your trees, or even your annuals, the later they are into their season, the more water they're going to need to create fruit. So if you start that process earlier, you're not only going to benefit more from your garden in the long term, but you'll actually be able to soak up that water and make use of it instead of it kind of wasting away and draining away or creating pools in your garden. Yeah.
Do you have any favorite plants that you have got in the ground right now that are actually, surviving with all this water?
Well, surprisingly, I mean, I read that lavender does not like water, but I've actually planted lavender right near my drain. And that's growing amazingly, and I've been able to transplant it into that area as well. So I think like a perennial shrub or things that will root down into the ground would be the best way to go. Having trees as well. I know that a lot of people will create berms, which is like a little mound of dirt. Then they'll have a dip, which is your swale, and then another berm or another mound of dirt, and they will plant their trees where the swale is, which is where a lot of the water will collect. Or will the water collect in the berm and then it slowly feeds water? I'm not sure which way it is.
Well,
I love
it'll
seeing
pull
pictures
in
of
the
it.
swale.
Yeah. And so you plant your trees in there because then they can really take advantage of that water. And by being able to soak in that water, you can then plant other shrubs and ground covers and annual plants around those trees and again, be able to take in that water slowly without any of the plants being overwhelmed. So this year I've really started to move more towards working on my food forest and adding taller plants. I'm even considering putting like an apple tree into my garden beds.
Yeah, wow.
Because of all the rain, because I know that those big roots will store the water. And I think I said this in one of our last podcasts, I really want to take advantage of the power of roots.
Yeah.
And the way that the root systems of one plant can encourage the others to dig down with them as well and be able to reach nutrients that otherwise those roots wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's something that I'd like to do as well, and more so use native plants around here, because I don't have the time to kind of, I don't also know how long we're going to be living here. So while I'd love to plant lots of fruit trees and enjoy them, I think I want to focus more on the flower farm and adding foliage plants that I can use in bouquets, and there are so many native ones that grow really well around here. And I think I might have said this on another episode, but just looking at plants that grow well in swampy environments in your native area is the best way to go about a problematic wet area in your garden, because those plants are just going to thrive. You're not going to have to worry too much about them.
That's the thing. That's the thing about native plants, is that they're native and they've been through these conditions years and years, decades and decades already. Like, they're made for the harsh droughts that we get. They're made for the rain events that we get. This isn't a abnormal phenomenon that's come out of nowhere. Like, this has happened before, and it's all part of like the calendar and like the way of life for the earth.
Yeah, exactly.
And so plants like bottle brush are actually really incredible in wet soils, but then they can also withstand like our droughts and our really dry spells too. So they kind of like work in both senses.
Yeah, definitely.
Running out of breath.
Yeah, melaleucas are another one. There's so many different types of melaleuca species, and they can literally grow in water, like standing water, a lot of them.
Swamp banksias as well, beautiful.
Although my banksias died, unfortunately. But they were more the coastal ones, so they needed more dry soils.
Yeah, but now you know.
I do, yeah. I'm learning, and that's another thing, like just learning and see what grows well, because you might be surprised, like the lavender.
I know.
To see what actually grows well in wet areas.
Yep. Asparagus is also one that doesn't mind too much wet soil too. It likes dry soil too, but it's kind of like a bottle brush tree where you can plant it in both conditions, and it'll kind of, it'll adjust what it needs.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's a good one too.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that I've been doing is looking at a slope. Like if you've got a piece of sloped land, having pathways that are go in a certain direction on that slope to make sure that the water isn't going to cause any erosion on your land. So I've been implementing, they're kind of mini swales. They're just pathways, but they're still, it's still a rise and a dip in the land down the small little slope that we have. And it does retain water for the drought, but it also really does prevent erosion, which is something I really don't want, because I have open bare soil now with the garden beds. Yeah. So I've kind of dug out a little bit of the pathway so that it's at a lower point than the garden beds. Yeah. And that means that all of the things in the garden bed are going to be raised out of the water as well.
Yeah, so then the water's pulling down at the bottom and draining away into those spots. That goes really well with like having raised beds in your gardens as well. So you've created a raised system too, but then having like the support structures around it, whether it be logs or wood or metal. I've seen people using corrugated iron. Yep. All work really well to just keep that soil that you have in place so that it isn't eroding away.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We've got a lot of natives around, so things like grevillea, which grows so wonderfully on our property as well, but I've started to plant a lot of those, or trying to transplant a lot of them onto our hills. We have quite a few hills and slopes on our property, And so instead of trying to create swales on someone else's property when we don't have permission to landscape it, and instead of using wood and resources to try retain it all, we're trying to go a different way of just planting things that can hold the soil in place with their roots.
That's a good idea.
And grevillea is a really good one for that.
Yeah, because sometimes swales, you need actual machinery to do large ones, and it's just not feasible for the everyday gardener. But you can, there are other methods to planting plants as well, like raising up, doing those like small little mounds. Even if you've got, I had a bunch of herbs that I was planting in the ground, and I noticed the soil was just a little bit too wet. So in all of those areas I wanted to plant them, I just build up the soil a little bit around it. So it looks kind of a bit weird, but they're thriving now.
Oh, as long as the plants are doing well, that's all that matters.
Exactly. And the water can just drain off that, making sure that no roots are exposed to the air or anything like that. And over time, you might get a little bit of erosion around that plant, but just topping it up with mulch or soil is a good idea, but really can help if you just absolutely can't do anything else.
Yeah. And mulch is a really good other thing to talk about as well. I've actually seen a few people who have created swales just by piling up mulch on their property. So instead of using machinery to dig down to create the swales, they're instead creating the berms or like the hill part of the swale, like the raised bit, and then doing that in a few different places, especially if they already have a slope. They just create the mounds along the line of the property to create that same effect. So that's kind of cool and a different way to do it if you've got lots of access to mulch.
Definitely.
Yeah. I wanted to say as well, both you and I probably have a lot of resources and people who are our go-tos when it comes to permaculture and working with water on your land. So any resources or people that inspire us or who have some really great ideas. I'm terrible at remembering names. So I'm just going to say right now, we'll leave them in the show notes so that if anyone's curious to find out more about like the permaculture principle of observing your land and of being able to harness water's power and all of those kinds of things, we'll just have that all in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds good.
Because I'm terrible with names, so I just would be able to not come up with something off the top of my head, but I know that I've got, like, I can already picture the people that I want to just throw out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Mulch is an incredible thing to have in your garden, but I'm finding that with the wet weather, I don't know if it's just the type of mulch I'm using, but it feels like it's getting so soaked, which is the purpose of mulch. You want it to hold that water and retain it and slowly release it into the ground. And during hot summers, this is perfect because it keeps the soil cool, it keeps it moist, and it's just an all-round amazing thing when it comes to weeds, because weeds pull out really easily, weeds hardly come up. But I'm noticing that my mulch, I use leaf mulch in my garden, and wood chips is just getting so soaked that the soil underneath it is just almost waterlogged, just as badly as if it wasn't there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not, well, I suppose I use different mulch. So I use sugarcane mulch, which is a lot more light and fluffy, but still, like, I'm noticing that the soil is waterlogged as well. I think it's just, for here, it's our water table. I notice as the further I go down the property, the higher the water table is. So because it's just, that's where it's pulled and raised. So it might just be the water table also is raising. I know so many people have had problems with water damage with their houses and around it. And I think it is really that it's raising up really, really high. The plants that I have planted down the back, I went down there yesterday and the holes of them are filled with water.
Wow.
It's that high. So it's not draining. So it could be that too.
Yeah.
But I know there are different types of mulch, and it might just be that the leaf mulch takes a little bit more time to obviously dry out and then aerate the soil.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're walking on it or around it. But
yeah, I have a feeling that I just need to put more fresh mulch in. I think that because a lot of it has been breaking down over winter and autumn, which is the great thing about mulch is that it feeds your soil and gives it a lot of like nutrients over its lifetime as it breaks down. And the rains are really helpful in this because they speed it up. But yeah, it's just getting that balance of how much mulch do I really need here? Because I've got some places where the mulch is piled up like 30 centimeters high.
Yeah.
So that's probably a bit too much.
Yeah,
So I have
but
to go
mulch
back and
is
do that.
definitely something to do prior to a rain event. If you can, if you have the time and the means to do it,
Yeah.
it's a great idea because it really does just protect the soil and help it from being washed away. That's what we want to maintain because it's worked so hard to feed our plants. We don't want it to wash away with all the rain.
That's right. Yeah. Adding lots of manures to your compost as well. And then using that compost in your garden beds can also have that same effect as mulch. I mean, if you get your compost pile to almost done, which the rain events should hopefully help to speed everything up as long as you're turning it, you'll be able to almost finish off the compost in your garden beds, which is what we did last year. And it just means that anything that would otherwise leach out of your compost pile and just float away, you can have going straight into your garden beds.
Yeah,
So I think if anyone's got like a big compost pile like us out there and it's almost done, like it's maybe got a few more steps to break down, just start to pile that on anywhere where you're not going to plant anything too soon.
Yeah, I found my compost is really working hard right now.
Yeah.
It's super busy, and I find because with all the rain, the worms also rise up a little bit. So it's good because they're rising up through that compost and working through things that are on the top rather than also always on the very bottom, which is where they usually prefer to hang out, which means that it's all breaking down a lot quicker. So yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think I could be wrong. I might be remembering this wrong, but I'm pretty sure worms can survive in water for quite a long time. Like if a worm got submerged in water, it could survive for almost a month or something crazy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I need to go back and check that fact, but like that would be amazing.
Yeah, well, it's pretty wet out there right now.
Yeah, so they have to survive somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, another thing that we've been doing to prepare like our homestead more so. So we've got a lot of animals and we've got a rural property. We've got 25 acres that we live on. And one of the ways that we try to prepare our homestead before rains, and this is something I did just last week because we had a week of rain announced, I went through and I checked all of my drains. So making sure that any leaves that have fallen from trees, pulling that all out, making sure that if any spots have been squashed down by like a car going by or by animals running around, just digging that out a little bit more and just making sure that anywhere where you have pools of water or water moving through your property, you're actually going and allowing that to move through.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. And it's really important. Another thing is creating systems like having water tanks to collect the water because water is so valuable. And I know that in these periods of very wet weather, we can almost get overwhelmed with water and start to despise it. But really, water is the thing that brings life to all of us. And the more we can capture of it and then be able to use it in the future, the better.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can move on to things that we're doing now with the rain here to kind of, manage all of this wet weather because I'm looking outside right now and my flowers are looking very sad and wanting some attention. But there are a few things that I have been doing what I can when it's not raining, getting out there. One of them, I suppose, is making sure that I'm on top of all of my fertilizer and applying a little bit more organic matter because with all this rain, a lot of it is being leached out. And particularly when you have a really heavy downpour, if you've just put fresh amendments or compost, some of it can be dispersed if you don't have those kind of catchment systems around.
Yeah.
So I've noticed some of the plants are going a little bit yellow, which could be just due to the water, them being waterlogged, but also the nitrogen in the soil, I think, is becoming a little bit less. Yeah. So I've been adding a little bit of fertilizer around plants that are struggling.
Give them a boost of health. Yeah, it's like taking a supplement.
Through. Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
That's a really good tip. I've also been starting to create more like raised structures. So having teepees, having trellises, and then encouraging certain plants to grow up those. So things like beans, even my tomatoes, my squashes, I'll be getting all of them to grow up. And I'm doing this as I'm starting to plant out my seedlings. I'm making sure they have these structures to climb up. so that they're coming off the ground. Because yeah, the thing with squash plants especially, or cucumbers, if they're sitting on the ground, they're more likely to rot. They're more likely to not get enough oxygen going through the leaves, which then causes disease like mildew and causes a whole lot of other problems. So I'm trying to get into the habit of just raising things up, not only because it looks beautiful to have different levels in the garden, but also because I can see the benefit of it. Last year I experimented with growing my zucchini up a trellis, and that worked amazing.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose if you can't do that, would there be any other ways? Could you put like cardboard or mulch under pumpkins if you can't do a trellis?
Yeah. Well, think like a strawberry. Strawberries grow best when they have straw under them, which is the whole point for the name. So you could use a similar concept of having a more dry, aerated kind of mulch underneath your plants.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. But I mean, having your plants raised up actually gives you more space. Because if you think about it, pumpkins and zucchinis and cucumbers can really sprawl out as far as they can if they've got enough nutrients. And if you're encouraging that growth up, then all of the space below them you can actually use for other things as well.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
I'm just terrible at making structures.
Oh, I know. And it can be a bit like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got we're on a rural property, so we have access to wood all the time. There's always logs falling down. There's trees falling down. There's trees that have to be thinned out, especially on driveways. We've got branches from like massive eucalyptus trees that drop to the ground. And it's part of our social responsibility, not social responsibility. Oh my gosh, my words today. It's part of our responsibility to go and collect all of the debris out in the forest, because it's going to reduce the likelihood of fires spreading and starting. So yeah, by being able to take all of that out of the forest and then use it in some way that is really valuable to the garden is really helpful. Just grab a couple of logs from us next time you're done.
Just put them on the roof rack and just drive home.
Why not? So that's what we're doing during the rain events, and I'm just planting as much as I can. I did already have a lot of plants in the ground, and I've been trying not to dig out the roots and letting them stay in there or like stay over their period of time, just so that there's always things in the ground to soak up that water. Because I'm noticing it's the garden beds that don't have things planted that are doing the worst.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, all of my new garden beds are struggling a little bit more than the older ones.
What really sucks is we probably put those garden beds aside wanting to plant into them come springtime, like first thing first in, and now it's kind of like a disadvantage that we didn't have things planted in them.
Yep, which is all right.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just, you've got to know your limitations and then work forward from there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think another thing that I'm trying to also do is just be mindful about what I'm planting and what varieties might do well and might not do well this year, because we are going to have a wet period for quite a while. So I'm focusing a lot on just being mindful about, or just keeping in mind that some things might not do well. Like I know we're really excited about tomatoes,
but they might not do well.
I know.
With all the wet weather.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I'm going to definitely try them and see how they go, but they typically do like a little bit more dry climate just to pollinate as well. Like pollination could be a real big problem this year. So I'm still growing lots of tomatoes, don't get me wrong, but I'm minimizing other things like zucchini and melons. Well, I'll plant a few melons, but I know zucchinis do struggle, and I have struggled in the past just because they just get powdery mildew, and that's just really hard to keep on top of. So
well, that's where I think raising them up was a game changer last year, because the zucchini plants and the cucumber plants that I had sprawled on the ground, they really struggled, but the ones that I started growing up, at least for the first part of their life, they did really well. They still get to a point where they're like, okay, I'm done. And the mildew starts to take over, but then the ladybugs come in and they start helping you out. So it's just interesting to see how plants try to survive in those climates. But I definitely understand what you're saying, that it's wise, if you want a bountiful harvest, to really be planting things that will do well. I actually did look up a list of plants that would do well, and a lot of them are typical plants of wintertime.
Interesting. I know my celery is doing amazing.
Celery's on the list.
Okay,
There
yeah.
you go. So
It
keep
loves
planting
life
more
right
of that. See, I'm not a fan of celery.
Oh, I love it.
I keep trying. I keep taste testing it, but I don't know.
Yeah, celery and
Not
my
for me.
parsley's doing great. Silver beet, love that. But
Yeah.
let's see what else is on your
So
your
a
list
lot
as
of it
well.
is things like your greens. So
Yeah.
spinaches, arugula, all of the greens will do really well because if you think about it, they do well over winter time when it's supposed to be a rainy season or cold or cloudy. And that's exactly the kinds of conditions we're about to get, just with a little bit more soil warmth.
Yeah, true.
But without that harsh sun. Or there might still be harsh sun here and there, we'll see. Cauliflower is on the list. Peas are on the list. I guess anything that you can raise up or has really woody stems, I'm going to say, are the things that do well. Mint.
My
although,
mint it's caught up now.
yeah, my
it's
mint's
happy
finally
now.
growing again
Yeah.
too. It was so like gangly for a while.
Yeah, I think it didn't like winter. But
Yeah.
it's happy now.
It's not a winter plant. Celery is on the list. Greens, so watercress, asparagus, and then it's just got like some cabbage
Yeah.
is also a good one. There's a lot of ones that I don't know the name of. Taro.
Oh yeah.
Is taro a root plant? Yeah.
It's like sweet potato, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It's just a little bit less flavorful, or I'm not sure. But yeah, so it's also, I think, a good idea if you're going to plant different plants into the ground, think of places in the world that are used to having very wet climates. So think of Asian countries like Vietnam, Thailand, all of those countries not only have really humid and sunny conditions, but they also get a lot of rain for most of the year. And so they're going to have plants that are adapted to being in wet soil that often. So a lot of Asian greens like tatsoi and pak choi are going to be really good choices.
Yeah. There's even some spinaches, Asian spinaches that grow really well, like in water as well.
There you go.
So yeah, there's lots of varieties. Also around us, we've got some native plants as well that they do okay in really wet soil, but they prefer a little bit dry. So you can grow them in pots, but they grow well in summer, and that's things like warrigal greens.
Oh, yes.
Sea celery is another native alternative to celery.
Native
and
leek grows really well in the wet season too.
yeah, so that's another thing you can look at and intersperse it throughout your veggie garden. Hopefully they'll pick up and do really well now.
Yeah.
But a lot of things we can just grow in pots too. So I'm actually just not going to be planting some of my tomatoes in the ground. I'm just going to be trying them in pots.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got
because
some
they'll have enough
small
water.
ones. Yeah, I've got smaller varieties this time that are patio varieties. So they're really tiny, compact tomato plants that I'm just going to have on my balcony and see how they do.
Yeah.
And I can then really make sure I know what soil they're getting just because of our soil that we have here. But you can add things like vermiculite or sand or tiny crushed up gravel to soil if you need for pots. But most potting mixes are really great to be free draining, and that's what I'll be doing for some of my tomatoes.
Yeah. It's so funny to think about adding sand into your soil. Like thinking about adding sand, it's like, why would I do that? That's got nothing in it, but it does make sense in a rain event. Like you need to add that drainage, and sand is really coarse. And if you think of the plants that survive well in coastal conditions, they live in sand. So there's enough nutrients there for them, but plenty of drainage.
Yeah. Because, I mean, if the plant doesn't have the ability to get through those air pockets, like in clay soil, it's not going to be able to uptake nutrients. So I think that's what's happening in my garden as well. The roots physically cannot get through the clay to uptake nutrients because there's nutrients in there. We've done the soil test and I know that there is, but it's physically impossible
for it to get in there.
Yeah.
And so if you're adding sand, don't just go ahead and like add like a bucket of sand just on top of your soil and hope it goes in. Like you do need to work it into the soil, and it kind of, I feel like over winter time and autumn time was the time to start doing all of those things. So if you're a little bit late into the game, like don't stress, just kind of expect that that's probably your first step if you're noticing a lot of very wet, soggy soil in your garden. Start to work some compost into it, start to work some vermiculite into it, some coconut coir, some sand, start to get that aeration going in it when you can. Don't expect that if you plant your plants into it right now as it is, that they're going to do well.
Yeah, unless you also, when you dig the hole, then you can add amendments in there as well. So if you haven't amended your soil at all, when you do dig a hole, sometimes you can dig it just a little bit deeper and then maybe add some compost or potting mix or something to help that soil, mix it up a little bit in the hole, and then like plant your tomato plants in.
Yeah, which is what I do with trees. When I plant a new tree, I'm not going to amend the whole area that I've got the tree in.
Yeah.
I'm only going to amend and work the soil around where the roots are going to be to make sure it's got a good chance at life. But also I'm going to make sure that some of the soil that I did take out of the hole is in the mix as well, so that the tree's not so happy at the beginning of its life with this perfect condition and then it's like dire conditions from then on. Like it needs to all be mixed together so that a tree can still sense where its land or like what environment it's really going to be growing in.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
One other thing I'm also interested in is what you're doing with animals on your property, because I know you have quite a lot and you've just recently acquired a few more. But are you doing anything different with all of this rain with your animals in terms of managing feed, medications, anything like that?
Yeah, so with our animals, a lot of them we've built structures. So anywhere where we move them onto the property, they've got shelter. We also, at this point of the year, we start to put them underneath trees so that, like our sheep, underneath trees so that they've got shelter from the rain. But we found plenty of times where our sheep just happily forage the paddock, like without going undercover for rain. So they don't seem to mind too much. But it is a priority just to make sure that we're adding some fresh bedding so that they've got somewhere dry to sleep, and just moving them more regularly because they're going to compact that soil because it's wet a lot more quickly. We did acquire some geese as well, and we're going to get some ducks soon as well, I hope. And the purpose of them with rain events is there's going to be a lot more slug and snail pressure.
True.
And they love snails and slugs. So by having them in the orchard and having them around other points in the garden, they'll be able to get rid of that snail and slug pressure. So that's going to be important too. Other than that, we haven't done too much else to them.
Do you have to worry about like tick pressure and
we actually did have ticks on one of our sheep the other day.
Oh, okay.
So we are definitely checking them more regularly for it. But we had our sheep actually went for a walk down the hill and over to the farmer's property, like down the hill.
Often an adventure.
Onto the very beautiful green grass down there. And when we found them, one of our sheep, like when we tried to get him back to our property, he kept lying down. And that's one of the first signs that a sheep has a tick on them. Okay. So even a pig or an animal, because the tick is, taking away their blood, but it's also slowly releasing its saliva into their skin, which then has like poisons or whatever it has. Yeah. And so our sheep actually had 2 paralysis ticks on him, which are very, very dangerous. Yeah. One on either side of his arms. They always seem to be in the same spot. So in really delicate areas, like behind the ears, armpits, the like thighs, those are the places to check for ticks on your dogs and your animals. And we were able to pull it off and kill it. And then we just watched him and made sure he was okay. So plenty of water. If you have to force feed them water, do that. Provide all the grasses that they would need in lots of different varieties so that they have access to it nice and easily. Give them a nice dry place to make sure that they're under cover. Separate them if you need, but don't put them on their own because they'll stress out. And just some more minerals. I have a recipe that I was given by one of our subscribers for minerals for sheep. Great. And so when he was down, I just went over there and I took a little handful and shoved it in his mouth, and I'm like, you are going to get better.
Positive affirmation.
Yes. And just look after them. And he was able to kick it. So he's doing really well now, and he's frolicking around, buying at us, and we know that he's okay. But being vigilant of that is pretty important with animals.
Yeah, ticks are the worst. I've had so many here.
Yeah,
just
on you
myself.
or?
Yeah. I'm basically like walking around smelling like Aerogard every single day
Oh,
when I go
no.
outside because I have to wear it because they are so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just being careful when you're outside about the different bugs and insects because
And
they can
leeches
really
as
affect
well.
you. Oh my God, don't get me started on
Like
leeches.
avoid places with leeches. Don't go
leeches.
for a forest walk in
Yeah,
Diane's property.
I know. Wear big gumboots if you go to Diane's place in the rain.
You know what? Levi, Sam's brother, went for a forest walk, and for some reason he was adventurous enough to go right into our property. If you go maybe like 15 minutes down into the forest, you eventually get to a flat spot, and it's beautiful, and it's by a creek, and it's like a little fairyland. It's got all these beautiful trees, without the leeches though. But he ended up coming to a spot, and he looked down at his feet. Like this whole time he was checking his legs because he already had a few leeches on him, and it was fine. And then he got to a point and he looked down and there was like 40 leeches on his legs. I was like, oh my God, gross. Anyways,
sorry everyone for that image.
sounds awful. But during these very wet summer days, spring days, the best thing that you can do, because you're going to feel overwhelmed with what your garden's doing, it's going to feel really disheartening, and there's only so much that we as humans can do. So one of the best things you can do for your morale and your mental health is to spend more time inside doing the projects that otherwise you would be putting off. So
definitely.
What are some of the favorite things that you like to do inside, or that seem to always be on the back burner when it's sunny?
Catching up on all of the business side of things
Yeah.
with the flower farm, buying some more seeds, planting garden beds.
Planning is such a good idea.
It really does bring me out of the more kind of depressed state that I can get with all of this rain. And it's also perfectly normal to feel that. Like, I know a lot of us are feeling that. And
we've talked about it before. We had a whole podcast on the winter blues and how we were feeling during that time.
Yeah, no, this is us validating your feelings.
Definitely.
It's not easy. But I've kind of found my love again of baking. Like, I love to bake cakes and just cozy biscuits, and just make the place nice and cozy, put the fairy lights on like we do behind us, and have the whole like fireplace on the TV because we don't have a fireplace the house. But yeah, just making yourself feel better and just doing like cleaning up for the next season in the house, making the house a nice place to be. Yeah, just things that you love.
Yeah, I love preserving during this time, whatever I have, because a lot of the time there'll be things in the garden that will perish during the rains. So it's better to get to them nice and quick. Things like your cabbages, your like pak choys, herbs as well. Harvest as many as you can and start to preserve them, whether you're making pestos, whether you're freezing them, whether you're drying them, and use those kinds of projects to stay motivated and still be connected to your garden as well.
Yeah, freezing is probably a good thing to do now because I know for us it's impossible to dry anything. We can't be drying herbs. We don't have a dehydrator.
Yeah, no fireplace either.
Yeah, so freezing is the way to go for us. But is there anything else that you're doing? Any projects that you're working on inside?
Yeah, so I'm not doing too many projects because I'm about to go back to work, but I have just purchased myself some watercolor paints, as well as some watercolor books, and I'd like to get more into maybe drawing and painting some flowers and native animals as well that I see. So still being able to connect out to the garden, but still be warm inside and not feeling so disheartened with everything going on sometimes. Baking more for me as well, and reliving my childhood memories of cooking all my favorite Russian meals. I've been doing a lot of that.
So nice.
Yeah, but the fireplace for us has been a lifesaver during these rain events because a lot of the time there's so much moisture inside of the home that having that dry air from the fireplace really dries it out and actually allows us to dry our clothes as well.
That must be nice.
Yeah, I know that you've had, because you guys don't have the fireplace, you still had the issue of moisture in your home. So what are some of the ways that you're trying to stay ahead of it to make sure that it's not becoming an issue?
It's really hard here. Like, we've had to deal with so much mold problems in the house. Even right now I'm looking around and there's condensation on the windows again, which is making me want to get up and like wipe it. But just making sure we're on top of any water that comes in the house.
So wiping it down.
Yeah, we've got actually the dehumidifier on upstairs now because we just have to. Like, I don't love running things like that, but when it's necessary. Yeah. I mean, sometimes even when I do bake things, like the oven's really great just to dry it out. So I'll make sure that I make the most of that. And anytime it is, as soon as it's dry, just opening the windows up and getting that fresh air because it's not as cold anymore.
Yeah. So vinegar is also really good for mold. So spraying it down with vinegar, letting it sit for a while, spraying it down again and wiping it off is a natural way to stay on top of mold too as it's coming back.
Yeah. No, it's not fun, but
no. But it's life. Like, we're all going through this. You're not the only one that's getting moisture in your home and having to deal with mold. Like, it comes with the weather.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's one way that we can stay on top of the wet weather inside of our homes as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this has been an awesome conversation. Like, lots of really just packed full of tips, I hope, for our listeners, but also just relatable. Because we're all going through this together and we're going to be going through it for a while longer.
Yeah. And I mean, as gardeners, we really can't do anything about the weather. No. So, I mean, this might not be applicable to some people on the other side of the world.
I know those lucky people in Perth that are begging for our rains.
But yeah, hopefully the information was useful, and I know I really enjoyed the chat, and
me too.
Learnt a little bit about what you're doing, and I'll take some of that on board. And
and also your tips and the flowers that the plants that you're going to be using in your gardens to really take advantage of that water as well is going to be great. So any resources or things that we've talked about that we think could be useful for you or are really great places to keep exploring, we're going to have in the show notes so that you can access all that whenever you have time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for listening today and also watching. We do have a YouTube channel, so you can watch this podcast if you prefer. Otherwise, it's on any podcasting app that you prefer. And we'd appreciate it if you give us some feedback or give it a like or give us a rate if you would like to do so. 5-star only. No?
5-star only.
Up to you.
Tell us your favorite things. Yes. Please connect with us. We love hearing from you guys. It's so heartwarming to connect with people and hear that you guys are going through the same things as us as well, or really loving listening to the podcast while you're doing your chores or out in the garden. That was always our dream, to be alongside with you as you're doing those things that can sometimes be quite tedious on your own. Leave us some feedback, drop us a comment. We'd love to connect.
Awesome.
All right. Till next time.
Bye.